I'm Ross King, author of Defiant Spirits, The Modernist Revolution of the Group of Seven, and curator of the exhibition Defiant Spirits, The Modernist Revolution of the Group of Seven, which is on at the McMichael Canadian Art Collection in Kleinburg from October the 3rd until the end of January 30th, 2011. In the book and in the exhibition, I want to have a new close look at the Group of Seven and Tom Thomson and try to understand some of their influences. I look at, for example, a number of their European influences, the way in which Lauren Harris, A.Y. Jackson, J.H. MacDonald, Arthur Lismer all had artistic training in Europe in the first and beginning part of the second decade of the 20th century. And so I want to maybe disrupt or look at any rate, the traditional narrative of the Group of Seven, which has them going up to Northern Ontario with their minds as blank as their canvases and with no influences whatsoever on them apart from the landscape itself. And I think many artists have claimed that in the past, and many will try to in the future, but I think in virtually every case there is another story there, and there certainly is in the case of the Group of Seven, and I think it makes them much more interesting if we see them as a combination of the backwoods as well as the boulevards of Europe, where A.Y. Jackson strolled in 1907, 1908 in his corduroy suit with his hair slicked in with coal oil and a celluloid collar on, going to exhibitions of painters like the Italian Divisionists, the Berlin Secession, Van Gogh, Cézanne, these people that he later said were the gods in art of the Group of Seven. And so really what I'm trying to do is say that besides creating a very distinctive Canadian style of painting, they were within a tradition of mainly European painting, mainly French, but also Norwegian, Swedish painting, which took rough aspects of the landscape, remote areas, and painted them using very bold colors. And the book finishes in 1924. I cover a 12-year period. The book is a group biography that takes these characters, the 7 members of the group and Thomson, from 1910, 1912, when they're very obscure painters, young men with a vision of Canada, and it ends in 1924 when they've become the toast of London. They're celebrated by an English art critic, very eminent English art critic named Charles Lewis Hind, as the most exciting and vibrant school of landscape painters of the 20th century. And he compares them favorably to what he calls the French school, which is the Fauve painters, Henri Matisse, André Derain. And in fact, Lewis Hind says these Canadians are even better than that. And so it's hard to imagine painters getting higher praise. And I think the interesting thing about Charles Lewis Hind is he saw them within that, what he calls the French tradition, the tradition of the French school. And so what I really want to look at is how they came about painting in this very radical style, which was very different from anything that people had seen before that in Canada. One of the things that I did was, I was in many archives reading letters and diaries, letters to, letters from members of the Group of Seven, and so I wanted to show them as people as well as painters. When you finish the book, I hope that you'll have an understanding of who the young A.Y. Jackson was, or maybe learn things about Tom Thomson that you didn't know, or what the relationship between F.H. Varley and Thomson was. So there was an artistic ferment in Toronto at that time, say between 1913, 1914 and the 1920s, when all of these painters were together. They were working in the studio building for Canadian art. They first came together in the autumn of 1913. They they discussed art. They looked at one another's paintings. They described paintings that they had seen, whether it was in Europe or whether it was at a Royal Canadian Academy show or the Ontario Society of Artists. They lived and breathed art during these years. And I think it was almost inevitable when you get a group of people, a group of creative people together like that, and you throw them into close proximity, a lot of things begin to happen. And it certainly began happening very rapidly for the members of the group. And in the book, I chart the progress of Tom Thomson, who went from being a very unself-confident painter in 1911, 1912, to someone who by 1914 or 1915 was suddenly outstripping his teachers. He was becoming, I think, a much more exciting painter even than A.Y. Jackson or Lauren Harris, who were by that point much better schooled in art. They had a much more extensive education, including European educations in their cases. And so I wanted to look at these, the kind of critical mass that built up in Toronto, in this purpose-built building in the southwest corner of Rosedale, why it happened, who made it possible, who the painters were who involved, who their friends were, who was on the periphery of it. And then what I want to do in the exhibition is look at the fruits of that, all of that, the way in which get together a group of the paintings that they talked about, that they painted easel to easel, the paintings that talked to one another. And so the two things go together very closely, because the exhibition is meant to illustrate the sort of camaraderie, maybe also the rivalry, the influences that I chart through the course of the book. We're very fortunate to have on loan from Hart House at the University of Toronto what's probably my favorite Thomson painting of all. If I could have only one Thomson painting on my wall, I think it would take The Pointers. It's a remarkable work in all sorts of ways. I think visually it's stunning, but I think it's also extremely interesting because of the fact that it's a scene of the northern woods. It's Canoe Lake, it's an autumn scene, and it's very recognizably a Canadian scene. The pointer boats, the Pointers refers to the fact that these are pointer boats, shallow draft vessels with V-shaped hulls used to herd the logs together. There's also a crib and cage in the picture, this means of moving a boom of logs across the lake. And yet, despite the fact that it's this almost quintessentially northern scene, it is also painted in this exciting style, not the least bit realistic. It is something that Thomson developed his own idiom of painting from who knows where, from Georges Seurat, the French neo-impressionist, Paul Signac, John Sloan Gordon, perhaps, who was a man very well versed in neo-impressionism, who Thomson met in Algonquin Provincial Park. And so Thomson takes something that's very typical of Canada and yet puts a different kind of spin on it. And I think the combination works remarkably well. I'm Ross King, author of Defiant Spirits, The Modernist Revolution of the Group of Seven, and curator of the exhibition Defiant Spirits, The Modernist Revolution of the Group of Seven, which is on at the McMichael Canadian Art Collection in Kleinburg from October the 3rd until the end of January 30th, 2011. Come out to the gallery, see the paintings. There are some absolutely stunning, wonderful paintings that I think will knock your socks off. And also buy a copy of the book. Arm yourself with a copy of the book before you come out, or go into the gift shop where they're